Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. And this is a very short video because I realized that when I was doing the Mozzie build part 4 video, I flashed over one of the things, which is the undercarriage and how you put the undercarriage legs together and so on. I glossed over that mainly because I'd previously taken a video of that part of the build, but then in my haste to get the videos released I deleted them from the camera, so missed it out. So this is purely and simply to do with the undercarriage units and getting the legs, forming the legs and getting the wheels in place. So over to the bench and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So these are the bits to form the undercarriage. You've got the mounting block which you put the undercarriage wires through, and then you attach that to the undercarriage pinion. Here are the undercarriage wires. Now I've actually rebent mine. When I say rebent them, I put a tighter curve on the 90 degrees there than it came with in the kit. It's a much more relaxed curve, so I've just put them in the vise and bashed them over a bit. You also get a brass tube here which is in effect the bearing, and I'm using some of these lightweight air wheels on mine because they seem to be a good fit, the right size roughly anyway, and they are very light and springy, spongy. So to assemble the undercarriage assembly, I bored out the hub of the plastic wheels to fit the brass tubing in, and the idea is the brass tubing fits over the wires like so, and then the brass tubing fits into the block, the undercarriage block, like that. I'll just push them up to there, and they're held in place with grub screws, or in my case I've just put some 3mm bolts in there. I'll probably replace them with the 3mm grub screws later. What I will do though is I will take the wires out and put a flat on the wires where the grub screws are going to go, because ultimately there will be a bit of a rotation tendency. These aren't done up, so obviously I can freely do this. There will be a bit of a rotation tendency there, so the tighter those grub screws are, the better. So having a flat on the top of the wires will be great. The other thing is that my wheels are a very tight fit within the wire legs, as you can see there, and it rotates okay, no problem at all. But if that moved across, so the face of the wheel rubbed against the wire, then that has a braking effect. So to get over that problem, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a sleeve on, let's just hold that up to the camera, there between the bend in the wire and the brass tubing on both sides, and I've got some nylon spacing material that I can use, so that will go in there like that. That will keep the brass tubing dead center and stop it moving across one side or the other so that the wheel binds, which I don't want it to do. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm just going to tighten these bolts up, not over tighten them yet because I want to make sure the wheel is square. So I'm just putting a bit of pressure on those and then just making sure that the wheel is square, and now I'm going to finally tighten those up. Hopefully what that will do is it will make a mark on the wire that I can then put my filer flat on for those, or ultimately the grub screws to go in place. So yes, you won't be able to see it on the camera, but I can see there's the mark from the bolt that goes through there and there. An alternative to just screwing them in like that would be to take these bolts out put a bit of black felt tip pen on the end of the screw and then screw them in, which would obviously mark the legs as well. As an alternative, of course, what you can do is just say, right, they're going to go there, that's going to be where the flat's going to be, and just file a flat on the end of that, making sure the flat's obviously in line with the axle part. The other thing that you've got to do, well, you haven't got to, but it's advisable to do, is to put a flat on the undercarriage pin. So I'm just going to take that out. It's probably only got one grub screw in this, which it has there, and it's got obviously the flats on it for where it goes into the undercarriage, and there's one flat already machined on it, but we want one at 90 degrees to that, so I'm going to, at the same time as cut the flats on the wires, cut the flat on this. I've cut the flat now on the undercarriage pin. There's the existing, or the original one, and mine's at 90 degrees to that, so that sits on the top, and the legs you can just see there where I've cut the flat in the legs. The other thing to be aware of is that the alloy blocks are handed, for want of a better word. You'll notice that the holes are offset here, and the broader part of the block sits at the top and the narrower part sits at the bottom. So that's it there. Let's turn it round there. It sits like that, top, bottom, and that gives it the correct offset against the undercarriage gear. So I'll just put that in place and show you what I mean. So let's put this back in. Making sure that when you put it back in place, this will tell you whether your slot that you've cut or formed, your groove, is in the right place, which it is on mine. In other words, at 90 degrees to the rest of the shaft. If not, just put it back in the vise and reform it. With the parts machined, the pin and the undercarriage legs, it's time to assemble everything. Now you may find it easier not to assemble it on the retract, to assemble it outside of that, and your best bet would be to put the legs in with the flats facing upwards. I've already put grub screws in here to replace the bolts that I did have, so bearing in mind which way round the block goes, put the legs, to undo my grub screws a bit, right, so I'm just putting it so the wires are flush with the top of the alloy block. Those grub screws should now bite into the flats that I've put. Now that can't twist, it's firm in there. I've still got to do my bushing there, but I just want to make sure all of this is correct before I do that. So put this back onto my retract unit. There we go. Bearing in mind there's got to be a gap between the alloy block and the undercarriage unit there. So now tightening that up onto the flat, Yeah, that bolt goes in right the way down there. That's much better. That's a nice solid unit there. So now what I need to do is just check here the bushing to make sure my tyre doesn't rub against the wires. So literally my bushes are going to be very, very narrow. They're only going to be just like a thick washer, you can see there. That's all they need to be. So I'll cut those and put those on. I've got my spacers put on. I've actually used heat shrink with the washer, or will have a washer on it, on the end of it. So I can now fit the wires back in the block. Push them through so that they just come to the end. Tighten up the grub screws. It should mean they're now in there rock solid. And now the unit can go back on. Tighten the bolt up against the flat, making sure that everything stays in line, which it does. And I've now got a wheel that won't rub against the legs, which is fine. So I can now assemble this back in the model. Now putting it back in the model, the kit comes with a couple of rubber shock absorbing pads which go underneath the retract plate like so. And the idea with this is it provides some give when the legs are down and the plane hits the ground. So it's a bit of shock absorbency really that's being applied to there. You may need to trim these to length, because what you don't want to do is them to foul the alloy block when the legs retract. So just trim those to length to the size of the plate there, and then they can be mounted back in the airframe in the nacelle. Right, so that was the undercarriage retract mechanism. Like I said, I'd missed that off my previous video, and it seemed right to have a little dedicated video on that, because the last thing you want to do is put it together and there'd be problems with it, but the wheel binding or whatever, so rotating. Yeah, I know a lot of it is probably teaching you how to suck eggs, but hey, it's better told and ignored than not told at all. As per normal, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Put any comments down below and thumbs up down below, and I will get back to you on any comments as and when I can, and look forward to seeing you in the next build video of the Mozzie. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers.